Hey Defenders, welcome back. In this video, we are going to learn how to take our raw logs that are being stored within our Wazoo indexer and beautify them a little bit and create visualizations and dashboards that are actually useful to our SOC analysts, and that will allow us to visualize the data in a much more human-friendly way, in a way that is logical and makes sense to us, so that we actually get good insight into what's going on in our environment. So we're going to take our data from something that looks like this, for example, into a beautiful dashboard that is actually of value to us and actually gives us the insight into what is going on within our environment. Grafana is going to be the visualization tool of choice. So we will install Grafana, we will connect it to our Wazoo indexer so we can read the data, and then we will actually walk through how we can build our own dashboards. So stay tuned and let's get into it. And all right, so for those who want to follow along, I will link the blog post in the description below. You guys may be asking, why are we using Grafana rather than the Wazoo dashboards, which essentially is just the forked version of Kibana. Personally, I think Kibana is kind of slow. Grafana, I don't know what it's doing under the hood that's different, because essentially it's still just making the same API calls to our Wazoo indexer that Kibana or the Wazoo dashboards are doing, but Grafana just loads it a hell of a lot faster. So in terms of speed, I think Grafana blows Kibana out of the water. Grafana also allows us much more customization when it comes to our panels, our widgets, and our whole dashboards kind of overall. Grafana allows us to add our own branding and touch as well with custom HTML and CSS. And in my opinion, Grafana just allows us to be so much more flexible. We can also create different organizations within Grafana. So if you're looking for a multi-tenant type of approach, Grafana is also a perfect solution for that. Grafana also gives us much more unique data sources that we can plug into. So Kibana is very limited to only being able to read data that's stored within Elastic, where Grafana allows us to not only read that data, but also maybe I have data stored in a MySQL database that I want to load and build dashboards around. Maybe I just have a local CSV file whose data I want to use to build panels and widgets that will populate a dashboard. And there are so many possibilities. Grafana can even plug into like Azure Monitoring or CloudWatch. It can plug into InfluxDB, which we'll get into later for a system metric collection. And Grafana is just much more versatile when it comes to what data sources I can plug into, which really makes it great, because now I don't have to worry about, oh, I had this data in a CSV file, but I need to write that to Elastic first so that Kibana is able to read it. And Grafana just supports much more flexibility out of the box. And from a security perspective, while yes, we would love if all of our data was stored in one common spot, in the real world, that's usually not going to happen. I may have my security logs writing to Elastic. Maybe my threat intel is being stored within a MySQL database. Maybe I'm storing computer names and their distinguished locations in a CSV file. And rather than having to try to get all that into Elastic, we now have various data sources that Grafana can plug into, and that's all just built out of the box, which is really beneficial when it comes to the security team. So first things first, let's go ahead and actually install Grafana. Grafana is fairly easy to install. In this demo, I'm going to be installing it on a Debian 11 machine. So I'll just copy my few commands here where we are going to grab a few prereqs, and then we will grab the Grafana repository and actually install Grafana itself. So I'm just going to copy these series of commands here. I like that Medium updated, and now the code block is actually a lot more user-friendly than it was before. I didn't really like what they were doing before, so shout out to Medium. That's kind of nice. All right, and so now we have just installed Grafana. I am installing the OSS version of Grafana. There is a Grafana Enterprise edition that, off the top of my head, I don't know what more advanced features you may get with the Enterprise if you pay for the kind of next tier license. But everything that we're going to be doing, not only in this video, but throughout the rest of this series, is available through the open source version of Grafana. All right, so we have Grafana installed. So let me go ahead and go into the Grafana directory here. And you'll notice a config grafana.ini file. And this is the file this is our configuration file of Grafana. So all of our config changes will need to go here. There are a ton of settings. There are a ton of config settings we can make within here, from the authentication mechanism, whether it's just a local authentication, or if we want to use OAuth, you can configure that within here. But as of now, I'm just going to focus on changing the protocol that we'll use to connect to Grafana from HTTP to HTTPS and add in my own self-signed certs. So we'll enable encryption as we are connecting to Grafana. So under the server block here, I'm going to just go ahead and change this to HTTPS. The HTTP port, I'll just leave at 3000 because my Wazoo dashboards that's also running on this box is already using 443. For the domain, I'm just going to go ahead and change it to grafana.sockfortress. And I am now also going to add my cert and key. And actually, these little semicolons here are actually comments. So I need to remove the semicolon here to override any of the default settings. So any setting changes that I make, I need to make sure that I remove that. So I'll remove it on domain, and then also remove on the cert and key. All right, and now let me actually point to these guys. So I'm actually going to copy my cert, the certificate I'm going to use, into Etsy SSL certs. So I'll copy that there, and then I will copy my key into Etsy SSL private. So, okay, I've got those copied there. Now let me open back up my grafana.ini file real quick, and let me reflect those changes there. So I'll go into my cert file, and here I will point to, so go ahead and paste that there. And all right, let's go ahead and now actually start up Grafana. So go ahead and just run a systemctl, start Grafana server. The service is called Grafana-server, not just Grafana. So make sure you do reflect to that accordingly. All right, cool. And now looks like we are up and running. Let me make sure it is listening on port 3000. All right, cool. Okay, so now we should be good to now connect to Grafana within our web browser. Because this is not a public DNS name, I am going to cheat and just add it to my local host file of my machine here. So I'll go into system 32, drivers, Etsy, open up my host file here. Public IP address of this guy is here. And I called you grafana.sockfortress.co. All right, so I'll go ahead and save. Go ahead and save that guy. And now within my web browser here, grafana.sockfortress.co on port 3000. So, okay, cool. So we're getting our of course, our browser is going to complain because this is a self-signed cert. So it's going to say, hey, I don't think I should trust this. And if we open this guy up, we see our certificate details that we have there. So go ahead and select advanced and say, yep, I want to go ahead and go through it. And now we are prompted to log on. I think by default, it's just admin. Yep. Okay, cool. So now I'll just set a new password. I'll set a new password. I'll say, please subscribe. Cool. So now we have logged onto Grafana. I don't need the CLI, at least at the moment. So I'm just going to go ahead and open this guy back up again. So now that Grafana is up and running, we need to now configure it to read data from our Wazoo indexer, because that's where all of our Wazoo logs are actually stored. So we need to tell Grafana, hey, when the data that you're going to use to populate our visualizations and dashboards actually resides here. And this is where you could also configure your connection to your MySQL backend, CloudWatch, whatever kind of data source you're looking to connect into. So I'll go ahead and go hover over my gear wheel here. I'll go into data sources. I'll select a data source, add a data source. You can see there's a ton of them that come out of the box, and there's others that you can download and install. But in our use case, I'm going to select Elastic, the Elasticsearch. Again, this is the Wazoo indexer is just a forked version of Elasticsearch 7.10.2. So even though Grafana is calling it Elasticsearch, this is what we'll use to read our Wazoo logs. So instead of name here, I'll go ahead and change this to Wazoo. So I'll go ahead and point to the IP address where my Wazoo indexer is running. So I'll go ahead and say HTTPS because we did enable HTTPS. I'll say port 9200. So that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and say basic auth and then skip the TLS verification because the cert is a self-signed cert. So Grafana would complain saying, hey, you're not signed by a reputable CA. So I'm going to go ahead and say skip that verification. What I also want to do is rather than giving Grafana the admin credentials to plug into Elasticsearch, I'm going to create a new user and role within our Wazoo indexer that is just dedicated to Grafana. So Grafana will only be able to read data and not have credentials that could make any changes to Elastic. So I'm going to jump into my Wazoo indexer here. I'm going to go into security. I'm going to first select roles because I want to create a role, a Grafana role first before creating our Grafana user. So I'll go ahead and create a role. I'll just call it Grafana _ role. I'll give it cluster permissions. Say indices all. Say read, and then Kibana all read. And then my index permissions, I'm going to do a wildcard here because I want this to apply to any index that may be stored in our Wazoo indexer. And I'll give it the index permission, the read permission, and the indices all permission. So that looks good. I will go ahead and select create. Now let's go ahead and create a Grafana user real quick. So I'll select internal users. I'll create a user. I'll just call this guy Grafana, and I'll give it a password of please subscribe, and please subscribe. Go ahead and select create. All right, so our Grafana user is created. Let's go ahead and go back into roles. And what we're going to do is map our new Grafana user to the Grafana role that we just created. So I'll go ahead and find my Grafana role. I'll go ahead and go into mapped users. I'll select mapped users and I will search for my Grafana user and map that accordingly. And with that now created, we are ready to finish the rest of our configuration for our data source. So I'll go ahead and specify the user as Grafana. I'll do a password of please subscribe. And I will now point to my index name that holds our data. And you guys remember we have our data starting to write to our Wazoo indexer now. So if I go into my index management, look at indices here, we called our index Wazoo-alerts-sock fortress. So I'll go ahead and copy that value. I'm going to paste that in there. And then I'm going to add a wildcard because I want Grafana to be able to read every index that pertains to my sock fortress organization. So this index is going to change when it rolls over to an _1, _2, and the wildcard now takes care of that going forward. So let me scroll down here and we will set it to no pattern. The timestamp, going to remove the @ symbol and just say timestamp. And our Elasticsearch version is going to be 7.10.2. So we need to make sure we change that accordingly here. We'll then add this to our logs. So I'll say rule _ description. And then the level field name will be syslog _ level, which that'll make more sense later on in our series of videos. And now I'm going to add to data links. So we're able to dynamically add data links that are populated with the actual value that's contained within the log to build URLs, which that'll become much more clear here towards the conclusion of this video when we add some Talos threat intelligence. So I'll go ahead and say caret, and then I'll say data _ vulnerability CVE, and then give it a $, and then copy the URL that I have here. And then I'm just going to say the label of this will be NIST CVE database. And I'll go ahead and add another data link and do caret _ ID followed by a $. and then paste my URL here. And I will need to change this from Grafana at your domain to sockfortress.co. Then I'll go ahead and give the label of just view event details. So now we're ready to save and test this configuration. So Grafana will now reach out to Elastic and see if it can authenticate and to the data source that we define, which is our Wazoo-alerts. And looks like I got an error. Let me make sure I did the password right. Please subscribe. Okay, yeah, so it looks like I mistyped the password. So after saving and testing again, our index comes back okay, so that looks good. So I can now explore the data to make sure that Grafana is actually able to view and read our data. So, and as you can see, we get some hits here. If I go ahead and change this to logs, we can see all of our Wazoo logs now starting to come in. So this is good. We verified that Grafana can plug into our Wazoo indexer and is able to read data from our Wazoo-alerts-SockFortress index. So if you're looking to do a multi-tenant approach, you ideally would have different indexes per customer. And so you would just have to repeat that same process with the new customer's credentials, pointing to that customer's actual index that's stored within the Wazoo indexer, which is really flexible as well. Gives us really good multi-tenant functionality that we can use to host multiple organizations within one Grafana server. So, all right, that's starting to look pretty good. So let's now actually build a dashboard. So I'll go ahead and select my little dashboard looking icon here. I'll just go ahead and select new and we'll select dashboard. And we're going to first add a new panel. And what I actually want to do first, real quick before we do that. So if you go back into your Graylog, you'll notice that our rule groups aren't split up. So we have Windows, we have Windows, then we have Sysmon, then we have Sysmon Event 22. So I actually want to extract these rule groups into own individual fields. And that will allow me to build much more accurate dash visualizations. And this kind of goes into the field normalization that we've been talking about over the last few videos, is that we need a standard to how we name our fields and what data is written to those fields, because this will make creating our dashboard, not only our dashboards, but also our alerting in the future, more universal and just easier on our end. So because I'm in this example, we're just going to build a dashboard that details network connections that are being made. So, and I know network connections come with Sysmon event number 3, not number 22, but we need a way to be able to filter on that very quickly, because that's the filter we'll use to build our visualizations going forward. So I'm actually going to create a extractor that splits my rule group into various fields. So I'm going to go ahead and select my rule groups message here. I'm going to select create extractor. And here I am going to use the split and index extractor. So I'll go ahead and select submit there. I'll say my split by is going to be a comma, because that is within my log here. That is what is doing the split on the index, on the target index. And here we see target index is now 1. So what this is going to do when I select try, it is going to grab the first index before the split, and the split being the comma. So what's going to happen when I run try is that Graylog is going to extract this Windows value. So if I select try, here we see Windows and store as field. So we're now going to store this as a new field name instead of rule underscore groups. I'm going to store this as rule underscore group 1. And I'll just give it a title of rule group 1. And I'll select create extractor. I'm now going to repeat this process for the second target index as well. So I'll go ahead and select submit. And it's kind of annoying. You have to go back and select that entry again and then select create extractor so you can populate your example message a little easier. So again, split by is going to be a comma, and my target index, because now I want to grab the second value here, that being the Sysmon, will now become a 2 instead of a 1. So if I select try here, we now are extracting our Sysmon. So that's good. And I'll just call this rule group 2. In title, I'll just say rule group 2. Create extractor. All right, and now let's do that for the third value for our third target as well. Split by, again, a comma. I'll change this to 3, run try. Now we can see we're extracting our sysmon underscore event underscore 13. And then the field is going to be role underscore group 3. And my title, I'll say role group 3. And we'll go ahead and create that extractor. So now let's load our Wazoo alerts. And now we should see the difference being made here. So let me go ahead and just manually trigger a network connection on my Wazoo agent. So just did that on my side. So that should come through here in a sec. So, okay, we see our process creation. I know sysmon event number 3 is a network connection. So if I go into my rule groups here and look at the rules that the extractor that we just configured, here I see that rule underscore group 3, sysmon underscore event 3. So this is a perfect search query for us to use to populate our visualization panels and our dashboard with only network connections. So, and that's an important concept to kind of wrap your head around. I want to make sure you guys understand that, is that how you slice and dice your data is very important, because it just makes your life so much easier going forward when it comes to building our dashboards. You know, you could try to take the approach of doing it off of a rule ID, but these are going to be ever changing depending on what you're trying to what your detection rules actually come into play. And standardizing it and having a universal field naming convention really helps you become successful when it comes to building dashboards and alerting in the future. So we now have identified our field name, so role underscore group 3, and then the value that we want to use to populate our panels, which will be sysmon underscore event 3, which again will be all of our network connections. So let's go ahead and add our first panel. And for this panel, I'm going to use the SAN key panel. It's a cool little visualization, which you'll see here in a sec. And I may not have it installed by default. Looks like I don't. But that is no problem. If we go to our blog post, I think I included the install command line. Yeah, so anything that, you know, and Grafana has a very strong community behind it. So people are constantly building dashboards that they're uploading that you can actually import into your own instance, and building new, not only data sources, but also panels that we can use within our Grafana instance. So I'll go ahead and copy that command. And if I go back into my Grafana CLI, I'll just go ahead and paste that within there. And Grafana has now installed our new panel. Please restart Grafana. Okay, so I'll go ahead and hit it with a restart, do a refresh, and just reload it real quick. And let's select add new panel, and we should have our SAN key panel available to us. So we had to just install it real quick, but that's not a big deal. So let's now build our first panel. So you'll notice that you have the option to select your data source. So whatever your data source may be, if you have MySQL or you're trying to read from a CSV file, you'll have those data sources here for selection. Ours are going to be the Wazoo one. So we're saying this is where the data actually resides that I want you to use. Now let's go ahead and build our first query. So again, this will reflect back on what are the raw data fields that are a part of our Wazoo alert. So our rule group 3. So this field is what I want to use to search on. And then and the value that I want this field to have will be the one that holds our network connections, which is our sysmon underscore event 3. So I'll go ahead and paste that in there. And now let's build our group by term. So in this panel, I want to load my source IP, my destination IP, and the destination port that was made for every network connection. So I'm going to go ahead and select my group by, and I'm going to select terms. And if we go back into Graylog here, let me just go ahead and add that to the query. Let's say the last hour, so it'll bring that in. And now let's identify the fields that actually hold this data. So first we want to load in our source IP. And here we can see within the data that's getting written to our Wazoo indexer, this is the field name that will contain our source IP address. So I'll go ahead and copy that guy. And in my terms, I will paste that in there. I will then add the plus sign because I want to also add my destination IP address. So if we find our destination IP address field, which is here, so I'll go ahead and copy that guy and paste that within there. All right, we're now starting to have our panel actually populate some data for us. So my test connection that I just ran was out to 8.8.8.8. So we're now seeing our source IP connecting to these destination IP addresses. And last but not least, let's add the destination port that was connected to, which that data resides within this field here. So I'll go ahead and copy that guy. Again, add my plus sign because I want to also group by my destination port. So now you can see our panel has been built here. And what we can also do is clean up the field names up top, right? Because this is just kind of ugly. I'd rather clean this up with source IP, destination IP, and destination port. So another awesome feature about Grafana is in the customization is it allows us to transform pretty much anything. There's like so much you can do that I myself probably don't even know about. But in this instance, let's just rename our field name. So I'm going to search for the organized fields transformation. I'll go ahead and select that guy. And here you can see Grafana is populating off of the field names that we have included within our search. So the source IP, I'm going to just go ahead and change that field name to just source IP. And once I select, you see that has now reflected up top. So I'll do the same for destination IP. And I'll do the same for destination port. And you can see that those have reflected up top. So cool, looks good. And last thing I want to do is just change the panel title, which I'll just do off to the right here. And I'll just call it, let's call it network connections. That'll work. So I'll go ahead and select apply. And now it has added to our dashboard. All right, so now that we got our first panel done, let's go ahead and add our world map that will show the geolocation of our destination IPs where our endpoints have connected to. So this will be helpful from a high-level overview, just see a world map of where my endpoints are making network connections to. We can quickly identify suspicious countries like maybe Russia or China that we know our endpoints really shouldn't be communicating, shouldn't be invoking network connections out to. So it's a good way for us to quickly spot potential suspicious traffic all from our high-level dashboard. So if we go into Graylog, we'll see that our destination IP field, and here is the value that we want to do geolocation on. However, you'll notice that we actually don't have any geolocation coordinates. We don't have a city, we don't have longitude or latitude. So there's no way for us to tell Grafana, hey, this is how I want you to populate the map. We first need to generate those coordinates so that Grafana can then build the world map for us. So what we'll need to do is first enable geolocation within Graylog. So thankfully, this actually is something that is already built into Graylog, which is really nice. So if I go into System, Configurations, I'll scroll down to the bottom here, and on the bottom right, you'll see our geolocation processor. I'll go ahead and update that. There is a service called MaxMind GeoIP, which gives us just these database files, essentially, that store the city and ASNs of our geo coordinates. You do have to create an account with them to get it. However, I have extracted them under our I have stored them under our Wazoo rules repo just within our releases. So if you select our Wazoo rules repo and go into releases, you can just run a wget on these guys, which here I will do right now. So and I'll run a wget to get that file, and okay, it exists. Let me see what the permissions look like. That should be fine. Okay, yep. And let me do the same for the ASN one as well. So I'll just copy that link address, wget, bring that guy in. And if we look at all that, okay, it looks good. I don't believe you have to restart Graylog, but let's find out. So I'm gonna go ahead and select enable geolocation processor. The path to the city database and the ASN database, you can just leave as the default here because that is where we outputted the two files that we downloaded, right? So make sure you're under etc Graylog server and that the two MMDB files reside there. So that looks good. I'll go ahead and select save. And now that that's enabled. Also, another side note, your GeoIP processor may be like up here as the second slot in the order. Just go ahead and move that down to the bottom so that Graylog is actually able to, so this will happen after like the JSON extractor has already occurred and our field names have been extracted. So just make sure you throw that down at the bottom, or you probably won't see actual geolocation lookups until you do so. So make sure you implement that step. Go ahead and select save. And now if we go back into streams, I'll select my Wazoo alerts here and let me generate a network connection real quick off to the side. I'll just generate it out to Sock Fortress. Go, and we should get some alerts here. Let's look for our event 3. Okay, here we go. Here's our network connection. Okay, cool. And now if I scroll down, you see our destination IP. So here's our destination IP that we just connected to, which we had. And now we're getting our geolocation coordinates. So here's our longitude and latitude. Here's our country code. And what's nice about this plugin too is that we don't have to specify the field names where these IP addresses reside. So you'll see maybe it's a little overkill. Graylog's doing it for the agent IP as well, right? Because it's getting the country code, city name, and this is just a private address. So I guess it just defaults to this US and these longitude and latitude coordinates here. So, but what's nice is Graylog will automatically do any field that has what looks to be in an IP address. Graylog will do that auto enrichment for us. So we don't have to manually specify, hey, I want you to do the lookup for this field. You could do that with lookup tables, which we'll get into later on in the series. But what's nice is out of the box, Graylog will take care of this for us. So, okay, good. So we're getting our geo coordinates here. Now let's go back into Grafana and let's go ahead and add our world map panel. So I'll select add panel. And I can search for world map, which, okay, it looks like we might need to download that too. So I'll go ahead and go into plugins here. I'll just go ahead and save that, save, just so I don't lose that. Go into plugins and I will search for world map panel. Here we go. And for this one, we can just install directly from the web UI itself. However, it gave me a failure. Let me just go ahead and install it from the CLI since I was getting a permission denied error. I don't know. And I don't really feel like troubleshooting. So we'll see if this one works. Okay, download and extracted. Let me go ahead and restart Grafana. Okay, now once this guy comes back to us, we should hopefully have the ability to add our panel. All right, cool. And now we have our world map. So I'll go ahead and select that guy. All right, and now we get our map. Now we actually need to populate it with some data. So again, my query is going to be the same. I'll say role group 3 because we know that we want to load our Sysmon event 3. And now let's go ahead and add our country code that we're getting. So that will be this field name here. So I'll go ahead and just copy that guy. And I will change this to terms and I'll paste my field in there. And then I'll say then by my date histogram. And then I will go ahead and say timestamp. Let's go ahead and just add our panel and I'll say destination IPs. I'll say geo IP. All right, cool. So I'll go ahead and apply and save that off. And cool. So we now can hover over and we see 3 connections out to Germany. Let me do another network connection out to just 8.8.8.8. So if we look at the latest ones, come in here, 22, here we go, event 3. This should be a US based one. Yep, okay, cool. So now if we refresh here, we should get, yep, and here we get one little hit within the US here. So that's looking good. So we're starting to kind of come together a little bit. Let's also add a histogram. So this will tell us how many connections have been made per endpoint within our environment. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new panel. Go ahead and select the time series. We will again add our same query that we have been familiar with, that we've been working with throughout this video. Right, and we see our hits coming through. So let's now actually group by, because we want to group this by endpoint. So this will show us for endpoint A, this is how many network connections we've had. For endpoint B, this is how many we've had. And it'll stack those together so that we get a clear view as to who's generating the most network traffic within our environment. So I'll go ahead and select terms, my field name. So if I go back into Graylog, my unique field name will be agent name. So that's how I'll know the endpoint name that's making these network connections. So I want to go ahead and copy that value, and I'm going to paste that there. And now let me add a date histogram, and it's again going to be our timestamp field. And interval, I'll just set it to every 5 minutes. So for the style, I'm going to go ahead and select bars, and we also want them to be stacked. So because our legend so far is at the bottom, I'd rather get that over to the right. Okay, there we go. So now move my legend over to the right there. And so this will show me how many, and I only have the one endpoint here. So this graph isn't going to be too populated, but we can see for my Windows host here, so it's going to be represented by the green color. If you had more endpoints here, they would have like maybe a red or a blue. Grafana will take care of that automatically for you. And every 5 minutes, so you see our interval happening every 5 minutes. So we have 645, 650, 655, and hovering over, we see how many network connections were made during that 5-minute window. So here from 9:20 to 9:25, we had one network connection, while from 8:25 to 8:30, we actually had 3 network connections. So just a quick and easy visualization to say, hey, you know, maybe you notice some abnormal amount of network traffic leaving a host that is usually pretty quiet. Let's call it network connections histogram. So I'll go ahead and apply that. All right, and we are starting to make some progress here. Now let's actually add, from a security perspective, I may be interested in what's the actual process that's invoking the network connection. Is this something that's pretty standard like Chrome or Firefox? Or is this something that potentially could be malicious, like PowerShell invoking a network connection? Usually won't be happening during normal operations. So it's also important to view, okay, what are the processes that are actually invoking the network connections? And that'll help us pinpoint, okay, why, for example, asking the question, why did PowerShell invoke a network connection out to somewhere in Russia? Seeing, you know, not only where the destination traffic went out to, but also what the process was that is responsible for that network connection can really help us pinpoint security concerns. And this dashboard will help us quickly spot indicators that we may need to dig into further. So in our sysmon logs that we are capturing, our process that invoked the network connection is going to be under this when event data image field. So I'm going to just go ahead and go back into Grafana. We are going to add a new panel here. And for this one, I'm going to select a bar gauge. So go ahead and select that. Again, our query is going to be the same. We're going to say group by. These are going to be terms again. And here I'm going to paste in my image field that I copied. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a then by to do my date histogram again. Say timestamp there. I'll just leave the interval to auto here. That's fine. Now let's go ahead and set our panel options. So under calculation, I'm going to change that to total. You can change your orientation of how it's laid out. I like the horizontal view myself. You can, of course, change these if you want to a vertical view if you wanted, but I prefer the horizontal. You can also change like how it looks. The retro is kind of cool, actually. I kind of like that one. So You can change a little bit of how it looks and feels. Cool, that's looking good. You can also set thresholds. So you'll notice we've had 12 counts of this. And what that means is there have been 12 network connections invoked by our MSI executable. We can change these thresholds. So you know the colors here are green. So let's say I change this to 10. And what we'll see is that our count now changes red. So just a cool little touch that you can do there as well. So go ahead and change my title to where I'll just call it processors info. So I'll save that, apply that, and cool. We now get our processes. Let me trigger something on my end to have PowerShell invoke a network connection, and then we should see that come through here. So if I go back into Graylog, just trigger that off to the side. Here we see, here's our sysmon event 3. If we look at the image, okay, cool. We see PowerShell invoking it. So now if we go back to our dashboard and hit this with a refresh, we now see PowerShell process has spawned up here as invoking a network connection. So pretty cool. So we're now getting some insight into what is the process that is invoking the network connection as well. And if we look at our destination IP, here we see our new IP address added. All right, lastly, let's do an integration with Cisco Talos. So it'd be pretty cool if within Grafana, I could select the destination IP address and get some quick threat intelligence around it. So rather than having to copy and paste to like VirusTotal or Cisco Talos or whatever kind of threat intel you're looking to do, we can actually add that capability into Grafana, which is pretty cool. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new table. And I'm going to just call this table. And again, our search query is going to be the same. Group 3, and then sysmon event 3. I'll select my terms. Again, our destination IP field. So you'll see our table is now populated with every IP address that we've connected to and the number of times that we've connected to it. So what I want to do is add a hyperlink that actually will pre-populate my URL that I select with this IP address to Cisco Talos. So what we're going to go ahead and do is go into overrides, and I'll select add override field, and I'll go ahead and say fields with name. And what that'll mean is we'll now be able to, within our populated table here, you'll see our field name is this data_win event data. So when I select our drop down here, that's the option we get. If I had other columns within this table that had other field names, I could also select those as well. And the overrides are like really endless within Grafana. And again, this just kind of highlights the flexibility and customization you can do within Grafana. That makes it super powerful. We're going to go ahead and not do the cell display mode. We're going to go ahead and add a data link. So I'll select the data link. We'll select add link. And then within the medium post here, I've already added the URL. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. And if you're following along, you can just go copy it on the post. And I'll just say like Talos threat intel. So what's going to happen is you'll see we have this variable here, $, and then our curly bracket __ value .text. So what Grafana is going to do is it's going to take the value. If you see in the background here, we have our 8.8.8.8. So the URL it's going to build will be, instead of value.text, it'll be 8.8.8.8. It'll be exactly like that. And it'll do that for every IP address that is contained within our table here. So I'll also go ahead and select the open in new tab so that I'll still have my Grafana session within the other tab. So go ahead and select save. And let's go ahead and apply that. And now watch what's going to happen. So our table got added here. You'll see these now have URL. You'll see these are now hyperlinks. So what I can do is select 8.8.8, and it's going to open a new tab, and it's building my URL for me to Cisco Talos to get some threat intel. So here we can see this is just Google's DNS. And our search is pre-populated with the value that was stored within Grafana. If I select this 209, same thing. Our URL is dynamically being built, and we are now redirecting to Cisco Talos and pre-populating with data that pertains to this specific IP address. So it's another kind of quick and easy way to see threat intel on your connected to IP addresses. This is not automatic. Don't confuse that with like automated threat intel, which we'll cover later in the series. This is not that. You won't be able to configure alerts to say, hey, I want to automatically be notified if one of these IP addresses is malicious. This is not that. We will cover that later in the series, but I just want to make sure you guys don't confuse that with that. This is just simply, we can now build dashboards. You can do this for anything. This is just a simple example using Cisco Talos. Maybe I want to do this with like my CVEs, for example. If I build like a vulnerability management dashboard and get the CVEs, I can build a data link that redirects me maybe to like NIST website that then pre-populates with the CVE. So there's a lot of cool things you can do with this. And so the possibilities are like really, really endless. All right, last thing, let's just go ahead and actually rearrange the dashboard to a manner that we would like. So it is as simple as just dragging and dropping. I can drag and then drop my panels anywhere within the dashboard that I would like. Here, I'll just leave that up there. I'll do my histogram over to the side. I'll just leave that there. And then maybe my processes, I want to expand all the way out. So you can also select one of the corners and readjust the sizing of it as well. So I'll just expand that all the way out there. So, and all right, so here is just a very simple network connections dashboard. So I can go ahead and save this guy off. This one is, I just called new dashboard, but if it's your first time saving, it'll ask you for like the title and stuff. So you can just populate that there. I'll go ahead and select save. And now my dashboard has been saved. And again, this is just the beginning. If you go to our demo site, which is also linked down in the Medium post below, we built dashboards that highlight DNS requests, running processes on your systems, an alert summary panel as well. So what you can do with Grafana is pretty limitless. Once you kind of wrap your head around the basics of, building your search queries, some of the panels you can take advantage of. And in my eyes, it is the perfect visualization tool for your SIEM stack. So that's going to wrap it up for today's video. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next one.